Hello, my friends. This is Sarah, your Christian forgiveness coach, and you are listening to Forgive Everyone for Everything Every Day Right Away. And this is episode number 63, Forgiveness and Breakups. So, hi. Whether, it's a friendship in the workplace, a family member, someone you've been dating, or a marriage. Breakups can be one of the hardest circumstances to do forgiveness work around. Judgment really gets in the way here. We get very attached to our side of the story in breakups, and this is normal. It feels protective and it feels justified sometimes. We come up with stories and opinions and ideas about what happened in the relationship to make ourselves feel better about the breakup itself, especially if it's a breakup you didn't want, but even if it's one you did, it can still be a very painful experience. So, part of the problem is that we as a society, especially as Christians, we view breakups as bad, especially if it was a marriage or if it's family. We have this idea that we were taught that you should do everything in your power to work it out. And keep in mind here, I'm talking about relationships here that do not involve abuse. Okay, that is a whole nother territory that is out of my wheelhouse. I am not a counselor or a therapist. So if you are or have been in an abusive relationship, then I highly recommend seeking the appropriate help for that. If you don't know where to find that help, feel free to reach out and I would be more than happy to help you find it. So, what I'm talking about are relationships that have not worked out, not because of abuse, but because of misunderstandings, miscommunications, and mismatches. You've probably heard the term unequally yoked before. So, the loss of a relationship and of a future that you thought you were going to have requires grieving. You are caring for a wound, and it may not be healed yet, and it may even leave a scar, but it doesn't have to get infected if you don't let it. You're not going to die from it. It will take time it takes, whatever time it takes to heal, because it may be a very deep cut, but heal it will. And I have found by doing these three things that I've learned: grieving, in other words, allowing the emotions that come up versus resisting, reacting to, or avoiding them. And I'll talk about more about that in a sec. Recognizing the story that you're telling yourself about the breakup and about the other person, and being kind to yourself in the process. Those three things. There is no better time to be kind to yourself than during a painful breakup. So, we've all heard this saying, it takes time to heal, especially when it comes to a breakup. It's just going to take time. But how much time is really dependent on those three things. Ultimately, it comes down to how you're thinking about it. If you're really good at allowing your emotions rather than resisting them, if you pay attention to what you're thinking, if you pay attention to what you're focusing on, if you get help, if you have support, what you do with your time, whether or not you stay in contact with the person, and how you're focusing on yourself, how you're treating yourself in the process. All of these things can help heal that wound cleaner and quicker. Things that don't help that I've found, you know, things like jumping into another relationship, resisting those emotions, drinking, or I call it buffering, which is anything we do to avoid feelings. So that could be drinking, eating, drugs, overworking, over exercising, shopping, Netflix, porn, anything that you do that, and it could be labeled, good or bad, that you avoid feelings. Other ways that don't help, focusing on it all day, not doing anything, continuing to talk to your ex, continuing to see your ex when you really don't need to. If you have kids, you have to just be mindful about how to deal with that. Talking about it all the time without processing it, these are things that will prolong that process. So you've really got to focus instead on like what went wrong, what what happened and all of that, you've got to focus on what you have to learn from this. It's okay to reflect on your own behavior in the relationship, as long as you're not doing it in a way that harms yourself or beats yourself up, so to speak, and you're not like indulging in it, like constantly kind of harping on, what happened. Reflect on it to learn and grow, for information that you can take into your relationship with yourself, your next relationship, or your other relationships. So, relationships really are probably the best, most effective way to teach us about ourselves. Okay. So, of course, forgiveness is most definitely a huge part of the process. And some of us may find it easier to forgive than others. However, this does not exclude anyone from the pain. Okay. Just because you've forgiven doesn't mean you won't still experience pain. Forgiveness does not always bring like instant overall peace. You have to allow yourself to go through the process, all the while being mindful of what is happening for you. Okay. So I'm going to talk more about forgiveness in upcoming episodes. So, you don't have to be going through a breakup specifically to benefit from any of the topics I discuss. If you're a living, breathing human being in relationships with other human beings, then we all need support in this. So I'm going to talk more about, trauma, triggers, anxiety, apologies or lack thereof, more on each stage of grief, the anger, the denial, the sadness, the acceptance. I'm going to talk about boundaries, loneliness, comparisons, mistakes, control, attachment styles, the past, and most importantly, forgiving yourself. So stay tuned and thank you so much for joining me. I'm glad you're here.